I am very happy to welcome all to the session on statistics. Today my plan is to discuss on odds ratio and relative risk. This seems to be a difficult area. I will try to make it simpler with examples. Odds ratio OR is also called cross product ratio. Odds ratio is a statistic that quantifies the strength of the association between two events, that is exposure and outcome. It is a measure of association between an exposure and an outcome. OR represents the odds that an outcome will occur given a particular exposure compared to the odds of the outcome occurring in the absence of that exposure. That is, outcome or disease if there is an exposure or risk factor compared with outcome or disease in the absence of an exposure or risk factor. In other words, connection between risk factor or factors with disease or any association between the risk factor or factors with disease. Odds ratio is mainly used in case control studies, but it may also be used in cross-sectional and cohort study designs. In cohort study designs, relative risk is used more than odds ratio. Odds ratio indicates how much higher the odds of exposure are among cases than in the control group. Now, we will come on to how odds ratio is calculated. Calculation of OR. Odds ratio is calculated using a 2 by 2 frequency table. In this picture, the frequency table is shown. The disease plus and minus, exposure plus and minus is shown. Cell A is A, B, C and D. In this frequency table, cells are designated as A, B, C and D. A is number of exposed cases. B is number of unexposed cases. C is number of exposed non-cases. And D is number of unexposed non-cases. Odds ratio is odds of the event in the experimental group A by B divided by odds of the event in the control or non-exposure group C by D. Thus, odds ratio is A by B divided by C by D, that is AD by BC. That is why it is called cross product ratio, A into D divided by B into C. Let us look this with an example. 60 patients with lung cancer, 40 of them smoke regularly, 50 samples without lung cancer, 10 of them regularly smoke. How to calculate OR? OR equal A into D divided by B into C. That is 40 into 40 divided by 20 into 10 equal 8. So the value of OR obtained here is 8. What does this 8 means? How to interpret this odds ratio of 8? Smokers are 8 times likely to get lung cancer than non-smokers. This can be explained little more. That is, OR equal 1 or close to 1 means odds of exposure among case patients are same as to the odds of exposure among control. To make it clear with an example of smoking and lung cancer, no association between risk factor smoking and disease lung cancer. So, no association between smoking and lung cancer if OR equal 1. OR less than 1. Odds of exposure among case patients are lower than the odds of exposure among controls. The same example to make it more clear, smokers are less likely to have lung cancer. Over more than one, odds of exposure among case patients are greater than the odds of exposure among controls. That is, smokers are more likely to have lung cancer. Another example I will tell with hypertension and myocardial infarction or heart disease, hypertension and heart disease. 60 hypertensive patients, 50 of them have heart disease. 50 samples without heart disease, 10 have hypertension. How to calculate OR? Here, A equal 50 and AD by BC. D equal 40, that is 50 into 40 divided by 10 into 10, that is equal to 2 over 2. What does this over 2 means? Over 2 means hypertensive patients are 2 times at risk to have heart disease as compared to those who are not hypertensive. Thus, OR is a measure of association between an exposure and outcome. That is all about odds ratio, OR. Now coming to relative risk, RR. Relative risk, RR. What is RR or relative risk? It is ratio of incidence of disease among exposed to incidence of disease among non-exposed. RR equal incidence of disease among exposed divided by incidence of disease among non-exposed. That is A by A plus B divided by C by C plus D. A by A plus B divided by C by C plus D. This can be explained with an example. 1,000 smokers followed for 1 year, 8 developed myocardial infarction. 2,000 non-smokers followed for 1 year, 4 developed myocardial infarction. How to calculate RR? RR equal 8 by 1000 divided by 4 by 2000, that is 4. What does this RR 4 means? RR of smokers developing MI is 4 times greater than non-smokers. Now we will see major differences between odds ratio and relative risk. OR and RR. Odds ratio. Odds ratio compares groups with and without disease. For example, a group with lung cancer, another group of healthy individuals. Both have exposure and non-exposure to risk factor, smoking. Relative risk compares groups of exposed and non-exposed individuals. That is, smoking groups groups are without disease and followed up to determine whether a specific disease develops. So, smokers and non-smokers are followed up to determine whether lung cancer or any other specific disease develops. Then odds ratio measures strength of association in case control studies. Diseased and healthy individuals are compared and their exposure to risk status is studied. In relative risk measures strength of association in cohort studies. In cohort study, groups exposed and non-exposed are compared, that is, smokers and non-smokers are compared to measure the outcome or disease. This can be made more clear again with the same example. The research question is, does smoking causes lung cancer? To investigate it, do a cohort study, that is comparing groups of smokers with groups of non-smokers. These groups are without the disease, lung cancer. They are followed up for a specific time period to determine whether they develop lung cancer. Here, relative risk is determined. In case control study, cases are patients with lung cancer, controls are samples without lung cancer. Then determine the number of smokers in these two groups. Odds ratio is calculated. Diseased and healthy individuals are compared and their exposure to risk status is studied. So the results obtained, OR and RR, based on the obtained results, the value interpretation is made and the inference is drawn. These are the main differences between odds ratio and relative risk. This is all about OR and RR. Thank you.